The war had ended 300 years ago, but the Vreth still liked to remind everyone they had won it. Their ambassador, a tall creature named Selkor, had 4 arms, a face like polished bone, and a voice that made every sentence sound like a verdict. He stood at the center of docking platform Aurelius, a neutral deep space station owned by no one and used by everyone, and he smiled the way rich people smile when they give someone a gift they do not actually want returned. Behind him, held in place by 6 magnetic tow cables, floated the wreck. It was enormous. That much was undeniable. The Undying Fury had once been the pride of the Solhari war fleet, a vessel so feared that 3 civilizations had signed peace treaties simply to avoid fighting it. It had the bones of something magnificent. Great curved hull plates, now blackened and split. Engine nacelles the size of apartment buildings, now fused solid. Weapon ports running the full length of its belly, now dark and cold. It had been declared irreparable after the Battle of the Shattered Reach, towed to a salvage yard, and forgotten for 2 centuries before someone in the conclave had the idea of giving it to the humans. It was, in every technical sense, a corpse dressed in old armor. Selkor presented it with a speech that lasted 9 minutes and contained the phrase, "a gesture of great trust and brotherhood," 4 separate times. The assembled conclave delegates, Vreth, Orin, Solhari, and a dozen lesser species, watched from the upper observation ring. Some of them were polite enough to hide their amusement. Most were not. Director Orin Boss did not look amused or insulted. He looked hungry. He was a short, broad man with calloused hands and a habit of tilting his head sideways when he was solving something. He stood at the back of Earth's small delegation and said nothing during the ceremony. He did not applaud at the end. He was already doing mathematics in his head, staring at the wreck's hull geometry with the focused expression of someone who has just found a very interesting problem. Admiral Rivastran stood at the front of the delegation and accepted the gift with a calm, measured nod. She thanked the conclave in the formal language they expected, used the correct honorifics, bowed at the right moments. She was good at this, the performance of smallness. It was a skill Earth had quietly mastered in the 12 years since first contact. Appear manageable, appear grateful. Never let them see the inside of your mind. When the ceremony ended and the conclave delegates drifted toward the reception hall, Strand walked back to where Boss was standing. He had not moved. "Tell me what you see," she said quietly. He did not look away from the wreck. The hull fractures follow stress lines, not blast patterns. That means the damage came from inside, probably a cascade failure in the power coupling, not enemy fire. The structure underneath is intact. He paused. The engine core is fused, but fused means crystallized, and crystallized means the energy is still in there. Locked, not gone. Another pause longer. The weapons ports are sealed, not destroyed. There is a difference. Strand said, "Can it fly again?" Boss finally turned to look at her. His expression was the same one he wore when someone asked him if he could finish something by Friday, and the answer was yes, but it would be the most interesting Friday of everyone's life. "It cannot be repaired," he said. "It is too far gone for that, but it can be rebuilt. And while we rebuild it," he glanced back at the wreck, then at the laughing conclave delegates visible through the observation glass, "we can make some improvements." It took 3 weeks to tow the Undying Fury back to Earth. It was placed in Orbital Dock 7, a construction platform above the moon that had been used for building cargo haulers and survey vessels. The dock was not designed for a warship this size. Boss had the dock extended in 11 days. The first team to board the Fury wore full environment suits because 3 of the hull fractures went all the way through and there was no atmosphere inside. They moved through the dark interior with handheld lights, documenting everything. The alien script on the walls was translated in real time by a language program built by Earth's Xenolinguistics division. The internal layout was mapped. Every system was cataloged, functional, non-functional, and unknown. There were 47 systems in the unknown category. A Vreth technical observer named Preth had been assigned by the Conclave to monitor the project. He boarded the Fury on the fourth day, looked around for 2 hours, and filed a report that said, in the careful language of someone trying not to cause alarm, "Humans appear to be conducting detailed structural analysis. Activity is consistent with preliminary decommission assessment. No cause for concern at this time." He believed that when he wrote it. Dara Voss did not look like someone who was about to change the direction of history. She was 29, had grease on her left sleeve, and was eating a nutrition bar when she found it, a section of the Fury's inner frame where 2 alien engineering principles overlapped in a way that should not have been possible. She stared at it for a long time. Then she pulled out her communicator and sent a message to Boss that contained no words, only a photograph and a single punctuation mark, a question mark followed by an exclamation mark. Boss arrived 40 minutes later. He looked at the same section of frame. He set down his bag. He sat on the floor of the alien warship in the dark with his light pointed at the wall, and he started to laugh, quietly, to himself. The way engineers laugh when the universe hands them something they were not expecting, and it turns out to be better than anything they could have planned. "Right," he said to no one in particular. "Let us get to work." Nobody told the Conclave that Orbital Dock 7 had been working around the clock for 4 months. There was no rule that said Earth had to report its engineering hours. There was no clause in the gift treaty about disclosure of internal repair timelines. The Conclave had not included such language because, when they wrote the treaty, they had not imagined there would be anything worth reporting. Preth, the Vreth observer, continued to file his weekly updates. They were polite, vague, and mildly positive in tone. He described activity levels as sustained, which was technically true. He did not describe the fact that 3 shifts were running continuously, that Earth had quietly reassigned 41 of its best engineers to the project, or that the structure of the Fury's inner hull had turned out to contain principles of load-bearing geometry that Earth's materials scientists had never encountered, and immediately began arguing about, loudly, excitedly, at all hours, in a way that made Preth deeply uneasy whenever he visited the dock. The first real breakthrough came from the engine core. Every galactic engineer who had ever assessed the Fury's propulsion system had reached the same conclusion. The core was fused beyond recovery. The overload event during the Battle of the Shattered Reach had forced the drive crystal into a locked crystalline state. The energy pathways were sealed. You could not restart it. You could not extract it cleanly. You could not build around it without removing it first, and removing it would destroy the structural frame it had grown into over 3 centuries. Boss spent 6 weeks on this problem. He slept 4 hours a night and ate at his desk and covered 3 whiteboards with calculations that none of his junior staff could fully follow. Then, one afternoon, he stopped writing and stared at the board for a very long time. The crystal was locked. Fine. Locked meant it had a fixed resonance frequency, and fixed resonance meant it could be used not as a drive but as a tuning anchor. If Earth built a secondary drive system that operated at a harmonic of the crystal's frequency, the 2 systems would reinforce each other rather than interfere. The fused alien core would become the foundation of a hybrid engine that had never existed before. It was, by every established principle of galactic propulsion engineering, not supposed to work. They built it anyway. The hybrid drive took 11 weeks to construct and 2 more to calibrate. When they ran the first power test, the numbers came back 34% above standard Conclave military propulsion ratings. Boss looked at the readout for a long time. Then he asked his team to check the sensors 3 times before he wrote anything down. The sensors were fine. Meanwhile, Dara Voss had solved the hull. The Fury's fractures were too deep and too wide to weld shut with conventional methods. The alien hull material, a compound the Solhari called ethersteel, resisted bonding agents and had a thermal expansion rate that made traditional welding unstable under combat stress. Voss spent 2 weeks reading everything Earth had on material bonding. The answer, when she found it, came from an unlikely direction. Deep space mining operations on asteroid belts used a self-reinforcing polymer lattice to stabilize cracked rock faces during drilling. The compound was cheap, flexible, and designed to grow stronger under pressure rather than weaker. She injected it into every fracture channel in the Fury's hull. When the stress simulations ran, the patched sections tested 30% stronger than the original uncracked hull material. Her team celebrated. Preth, watching from the observation platform, filed a note that said novel hull maintenance techniques observed, and stared at the simulation data for a long time afterward without writing anything else. The weapons came next, and this was where the human engineers began to genuinely enjoy themselves. The original particle lance array was intact in its housing. It simply needed recalibration and fresh power routing. That took 3 weeks. But while the weapons team was working on the particle lances, a secondary discussion started in the corner of the workshop about kinetic armaments. The galaxy had moved away from kinetic weapons 6 centuries ago. Particle beams, plasma bursts, gravity distortion, these were the weapons of advanced civilizations. Kinetic projectiles were considered slow, inefficient, and beneath serious military consideration. Earth's weapons designers had a different view. Their argument was simple. A railgun accelerating a dense metal rod to a significant fraction of the speed of light produces an impact event that no known shield geometry is optimized to intercept, because no known shield geometry was ever designed to intercept it. Everyone had stopped using kinetic weapons so long ago that the defensive systems simply did not account for them. And if you fired a particle lance first, stripping the target's shields, and then fired a kinetic round a fraction of a second later, you had a combination that no ship in the current Conclave registry was equipped to survive. They called it the handshake. The weapons team argued for 3 days about the name and then kept it. Preth requested a full technical briefing from Earth's dock administration at the end of month 5. He was given a tour, a presentation, and an excellent lunch. The tour showed him the restored particle lance array, the hull repair work, and the reconfigured power systems. It did not show him the hybrid drive test results, the railgun installation, which had been covered with equipment crates for the duration of the visit, or the secondary workshop where the new AI navigation architecture was being assembled. He left satisfied. He filed a report that said the project was progressing within expected parameters. Back in the dock, Boss pinned a single handwritten note to the wall above his workspace. It read, "They gave us a broken ship. They should have thought harder about what that meant." Nobody from the Conclave ever saw that note. The Fury's old navigation intelligence had not simply broken down. It had burned, every pathway scorched during the same cascade failure that fused the engine core. What remained in the data housing was a maze of dead circuits surrounding a set of black box memory cores that had somehow survived completely intact. 300 years of flight logs. 300 years of combat records, sensor readings, damage reports, crew communications, and tactical decisions made in the middle of battles that had reshaped entire sectors of the galaxy. Earth's AI team spent the first month trying to revive the original system. They failed completely and without ambiguity. The architecture was too foreign, the damage too deep, the operational logic too tied to hardware that no longer existed. On the 31st day, a young programmer named Fenn put down his tools, looked at the intact black box cores sitting beside the ruined navigation housing, and said, "We cannot bring back what was there. But everything it ever knew is sitting right in front of us. What if we build something new that learns from all of it?" The project that followed took 4 months. The new system was not a translation of the alien AI. It was a human-built intelligence trained on alien experience. It absorbed every log, every battle record, every sensor reading in the black box archives. It learned the Fury's geometry instinctively, every stress point, every power flow path, every quirk in the way the old ship moved under thrust. It understood the Fury the way a person understands a place they grew up in. They named it Ward, Warfare Architecture and Response Director. Fenn chose the name and the team voted on it, and it passed 7-4, with the losing 4 maintaining until the end that it sounded too friendly for a Warship AI. Ward's first words, spoken 12 seconds after full activation, seemed to settle the argument in the minority's favor. All primary systems nominal, secondary systems nominal. I have reviewed the tactical profiles of every vessel currently registered in the Galactic Conclave military database. I would like to note that none of them were designed to fight this ship. I find that interesting. You may find it useful. The dock went quiet. Somewhere in the back someone started to laugh. Then everyone started to laugh. Ward did not laugh. Ward waited, processed the response, and added, "I will take that as a positive reception." Then it began, without being asked, to produce a full systems report, a maintenance priority list, and a fuel efficiency projection for the hybrid drive. It did this in 11 minutes. Previous estimates had suggested the task would take a full analysis team 3 days. Preth was present for the activation. He stood at the back of the observation room, arms folded, and watched the Ward interface cycle through its initial outputs. He was an intelligent creature. He had been watching humanity for almost 8 months now, and he had started to feel something he was professionally trained to suppress: concern. He filed his report that evening. It was, for the first time, not vague. It said, "The human artificial navigation intelligence demonstrates capabilities that exceed any comparable system in Conclave registry. The system has independently assessed Conclave military capacity without being directed to do so. I recommend the Conclave take a more active interest in this project's trajectory." Ambassador Kaur read the report the following morning, forwarded it to his administrative secretary with the note, "Preth is overworked, schedule him some leave," and attended a diplomatic dinner where he told a joke about human engineering that got a good response from the Sulhari table. He did not think about the report again for 6 weeks. The first full flight test of the rebuilt Fury happened on a Tuesday, which nobody planned but everyone later agreed was exactly the right day for it. Admiral Strand was on the command bridge. Boss was in the engine room, which he insisted on calling the engine room even though Ward kept gently correcting him that the correct technical designation was the Propulsion Convergence Center. Voss was at the hull monitoring station. Fenn was at the AI interface, though Ward had made clear it did not require supervision, and said so twice before Fenn sat down anyway. The Fury moved out of orbital dock 7 and into open space under its own power for the first time in over 300 years. There was a moment, just a few seconds, as the old ship cleared the dock clamps and the hull groaned once, deep and low, like something enormous waking from a long sleep. Everyone on the bridge felt it through the floor. Nobody spoke. Then Ward said, "Hybrid drive nominal, initiating thrust sequence. Current velocity will exceed Conclave standard military propulsion benchmarks in approximately 40 seconds. I suggest everyone hold on to something, not because it will be dangerous, simply because it will be fast." It was very fast. They ran the Fury out past the orbit of Neptune, pushed the hybrid drive to 70% capacity, and watched the velocity numbers climb past anything on record. At full burn, the ship hit speeds 34% above the fastest registered Conclave warship. Ward noted this, filed it, and then noted something else. At this velocity, if a pursuing vessel attempted intercept from the nearest Conclave patrol position, the Fury would have changed location before the intercept calculation finished running. Strand stood at the viewport and watched Neptune fall behind like a dropped stone. She had commanded 3 Earth vessels in her career. None of them had ever felt like this, not like flying something, but like being inside something that wanted to move, that had been waiting to move, that had spent 3 centuries cold and still, and was now, finally, doing the thing it was built for. Ward spoke again, quietly. Structural integrity at 100%. Polymer lattice under hull stress showing reinforcement response as projected. Weapons array standing by. Should I run a targeting calibration while we are out here? The outer solar system offers several suitable test parameters. Strand smiled. Not today. Understood, said Ward, a brief pause. Tomorrow. Nobody in the conclave knew any of this had happened. That suited everyone on the bridge just fine. Secrets in space are hard to keep because space is full of sensors. A Sulhari merchant vessel running a routine or delivery route past the outer edge of Earth's solar system picked up a contact reading on its passive long-range array. The contact was large, fast, and gone in under a minute. The merchant captain logged it as an anomaly, flagged it low priority, and forgot about it until his quarterly report went to the conclave's traffic monitoring office 11 weeks later. A junior Oran analyst named Tessel, sorting through 300 pages of routine shipping data, stopped at that single entry. She looked at the recorded velocity. She looked at it again. She checked the timestamp against all registered vessels operating in that corridor. There were none. She pulled the full sensor record. The contact had a silhouette, damaged, partially reconstructed, but unmistakable to anyone who knew what the Undying Fury used to look like. She did not forward her findings immediately. She spent 2 days cross-referencing. Earth's military budget had increased by 23% over the past year, which was publicly attributed to routine fleet expansion. Earth had filed no new vessel registrations with the Conclave Shipping Authority. Earth's docking manifest for Orbital Dock 7 had been consistently listed as Maintenance Operations Decommission Assessment for 11 months. Decommission assessments did not produce sensor contacts moving at that speed. Tessel filed an urgent classified summary to her division chief, who sent it to the Conclave Intelligence Committee, who sent it to Ambassador Corps, who called an immediate closed-door session with the Conclave Inner Circle. It was the first time in 4 years the Inner Circle had met on short notice. The Sulhari representative arrived still wearing her ceremonial sash from a separate function. The Vreth elder showed up looking annoyed. Corps stood at the head of the table and read Tessel's summary aloud, and when he finished, there was a silence that lasted long enough to become uncomfortable. The Vreth elder spoke first. We gave them a hull with no working engine, no working weapons, and no navigation. What exactly are they supposed to have built? Nobody had a good answer. Corps invoked the gift monitoring protocol, a clause buried in the original treaty that allowed the conclave to inspect any gifted vessel if there was reasonable concern about treaty compliance. He sent a formal inspection request to Earth's delegation. The message was polite, collegial, and framed as a routine administrative check. Earth's delegation responded within 4 hours, agreed without objection, and set a date 3 weeks out. Ward was informed of the inspection 31 seconds after the response was sent, because Ward monitored all official communications passing through Earth's diplomatic relay as a standard security function. Nobody had told it to do this. Nobody had told it not to. I can have all primary systems presenting within standard conclave parameters in 48 hours, Ward told Strand. The hybrid drive configuration can be masked by running a standard Sulhari propulsion profile through the external sensor output layer. The railgun installations can be enclosed within the original weapon's housing and the housing sealed. My own architecture is not detectable by conclave sensor equipment because conclave sensor equipment is not designed to detect an AI built from their own historical data using human architecture. I will simply appear to be a conventional navigation system. Strand said, "Is any of that technically a violation of the treaty?" Ward paused for 0.4 seconds, which was, for Ward, a long time to pause. The treaty specifies that gifted vessels may not be armed beyond their original specification. The Fury's original specification included the particle lance array, which we have restored. The railgun system did not exist in any specification at any point in galactic history, so it is not technically beyond original specification. It is outside all known specification frameworks. This is a legal gray area. What about the hybrid drive? The treaty says nothing about propulsion improvements. I looked. Strand said, and you? I am not a weapon. I am a navigation and response system. The treaty does not regulate artificial intelligence. The inspection team arrived on schedule, 6 conclave engineers led by a senior Vreth assessor. Ward greeted them through the ship's intercom in perfect formal Vreth. The assessor, visibly surprised, asked who had programmed the ship's communication system. Boss, standing nearby with his hands in his pockets, said, "We upgraded the interface. Standard maintenance." The assessor nodded and moved on. The inspection took 9 hours. The team checked every system they knew to look for. They found a restored particle lance array, a functional but unremarkable power distribution network, and a hull that had been repaired with materials they did not recognize but which showed no signs of weapons integration. They found a navigation system that presented as a basic-grade unit with limited capability. They found propulsion output metrics that Ward had manually set to display 11% below conclave standard, so the Fury would appear to be slightly underperforming rather than suspiciously within specification. The assessor filed a clean report. No violations. The Fury was, in his professional judgment, a well-maintained but otherwise unremarkable reconstruction. The inspection shuttle had not even cleared the dock when Ward began restoring all systems to true configuration. It took 4 minutes and 17 seconds. Meanwhile, in a separate section of the Moon's orbital infrastructure, the frame of a second vessel was already taking shape. It had no alien parts. It was not a reconstruction. It was built entirely from scratch using every principle the Fury's rebuild had taught them: the hybrid propulsion concept, the polymer lattice hull design, the Ward-class AI architecture, and the handshake weapons array as standard equipment. Boss called it the Fury's daughter. The project designation was EAS Persistence. Tessel, who had been promoted after her correct identification of the Fury's contact signature, sent a private message to her division chief the same week the inspection report was filed. It said only, "The report is wrong. I do not know how, but I know it is wrong." Her division chief told her she had done excellent work and should take some leave. She did not take leave. She kept watching. Earth kept building. The distress signal came from Station Keth 7 at 3:40 hours, Earth Standard Time. Keth 7 was a neutral resupply station near the edge of conclave territory, a busy hub used by traders, survey crews, and the occasional conclave patrol vessel refueling on long-range routes. It was not a military installation. It had no defensive weapons worth mentioning, and a population of around 1,100 beings from 14 different species. The Shattered Covenant, a rogue faction of displaced survivors from a civilization the Conclave had failed to protect 40 years ago, chose it specifically because of all those things. They came with 11 ships. They came without warning. They came to make a point. The Conclave scrambled 4 warships from the nearest patrol position. They arrived in 12 minutes, which was fast. It was not fast enough. The Covenant fleet hit 2 of the 4 Conclave ships simultaneously before the third had finished its drive-down sequence from faster-than-light transit. The fourth reversed course and called for reinforcement rather than engage. By the time the full Conclave response force was being assembled, Station Keth 7 was taking hull damage. The 2 crippled Conclave warships were drifting, and the nearest available reinforcement was 8 hours out at maximum standard speed. Ward detected the distress signal at 3:41. It had been monitoring the region's communication channels as a standard background process. It flagged the signal, pulled all available sensor data from nearby relay beacons, ran an assessment of the tactical situation, projected outcomes under 17 different response scenarios, and had a fully compiled briefing packet ready before the human crew of the Fury even reached the bridge. Strand read the briefing on her way through the corridor. By the time she sat down, she already knew the distance, the engagement geometry, and the fact that at hybrid drive capacity, the Fury could reach Keth 7 in 40 minutes. She knew the Covenant fleet composition, the weapons profile of each vessel, and the damage status of the two crippled Conclave ships. She knew all of this because Ward had included it, unprompted, in the first 3 lines of the briefing. The 4th line said, "Awaiting orders. I note that we are the fastest military asset within viable response range by a factor of approximately 11. Strand sent a 1-sentence message to the Conclave Emergency Coordination Channel. It read, "Earth Warship Undying Fury is proceeding to Station Keth 7. Estimated arrival 40 minutes. Please advise Conclave vessels in the area that we are friendly." Then she told Ward to move. The Fury went a full hybrid drive. Everything that was not bolted to the deck shifted. The station fell away behind them, and the star field outside the viewport stretched and blurred, and then they were running at a speed that nothing in the Conclave's current military inventory could match, toward a fight that 11 alien ships were completely unprepared for. Core received Strand's message at 3:47. He read it twice. Then he sat very still for about 10 seconds. Then he authorized the friendly contact advisory to all Conclave vessels near Keth 7, because it was the only thing he could actually do, and watched the situation unfold from 6 hours away. The Fury dropped out of drive at 4:21, at the outer edge of the Keth 7 engagement zone. The Covenant fleet did not immediately react. Their sensors picked up a large contact, but the Fury's silhouette was reconstructed and modified and matched nothing in their database precisely. They had 4.2 seconds in which the tactical situation might have been different. Ward fired the particle lance array at second 1.1, targeting the shield emitters on the nearest Covenant vessel. At second 1.9, before the particle beam had even dissipated, the first railgun round hit the now unshielded hull. The impact was not like any weapon effect in the Covenant fleet's tactical record. A particle strike looks like light and heat. A railgun round at that velocity looks like a section of hull simply ceasing to exist, replaced instantly by a pressure wave that ripples through the surrounding structure. The Covenant ship went dark. Not damaged, dark, fully disabled in one combined strike. The second ship turned to engage. Ward calculated the turn angle, fired the particle lance at the shield emitter mid-rotation, and put the second kinetic round through the engine section before the turn completed. 6 seconds had passed since the Fury arrived. The remaining 9 Covenant ships did what Ward had predicted 3 hours earlier. In the tactical briefing, no one had asked it to prepare. They tried to run. 7 of them ran in different directions, which Ward had also predicted, nodding in the briefing that dispersal is the standard panic response of a fleet that has not been trained to fight an enemy with superior pursuit speed. The Fury went after the group of 3 that had turned toward the station, because those were the ones still in a position to cause damage. 2 were disabled with the same combined strike sequence. The third managed to initiate a faster-than-light transit sequence. Ward fired a single particle lance burst at the drive coil housing during the spin-up phase. The transit sequence collapsed. The ship tumbled out of its own drive field and sat still, venting atmosphere, going nowhere. Total time from arrival to neutralization of active threats, 14 minutes, 8 seconds. Ward then turned the Fury toward the 2 crippled Conclave warships and began broadcasting a medical assistance offer on their standard emergency frequency, because it had noticed both ships were reporting crew casualties, and it had calculated that the nearest Conclave medical vessel was 90 minutes out. Strand stood at the viewport and looked at the debris field and the drifting ships and the station, damaged but holding pressure. She felt the floor of the Fury under her boots, solid, steady, undamaged. Not one hull breach, not one crew injury. A Sulhari captain on one of the crippled Conclave ships transmitted a communication request. When the channel opened, he did not say anything tactical or formal. He said, in a voice that was very quiet, "What are you?" Strand thought about that for a moment. Then she said, "We are the crew of the Undying Fury. We are from Earth. You gave us this ship." The silence on the other end lasted a long time. Ward noted, in its post-engagement log, that all 6 Covenant ships that had successfully entered faster-than-light transit had done so on predictable vectors, and would be recoverable by Conclave authorities within 38 hours. It filed this as a routine addendum, listed between fuel expenditure totals and an automatic request to restock 2 railgun magazines. Then it began composing, also without being asked, a full tactical summary for the Conclave's intelligence division. It titled the document, Engagement Record Keth 7, Classification, Complete. It was the most thorough record of a military action the Conclave had received in 40 years. Ward had observed everything from every angle the entire time. It always did. The footage from Station Keth 7 took 36 hours to reach every major Conclave world. Ward had released it. Not by accident. Ward did not do things by accident. It had made a quiet determination that transparency was strategically preferable to mystery, and had released the Fury's full combat sensor record to the Conclave's public information network at 600 the following morning. The file was tagged with a simple header that said, Combat Record EAS Undying Fury Keth 7 Engagement for Public Record. No editorial comment. No explanation. Just the footage, the sensor logs, and 14 minutes and 8 seconds of the most watched military recording in the galaxy's recent history. The reaction was not uniform, which Ward had also predicted. The Orin released a formal analytical brief within 48 hours. It was dry, precise, and honest in the way only the Orin could manage when they were trying to process something they did not like. It stated that humanity had demonstrated an adaptive engineering capacity operating outside all established Conclave frameworks, and that the combination of restored alien systems with novel human technology represents a class of military capability for which no existing Conclave doctrine provides adequate response. The brief was 11 pages long. The relevant section was 3 sentences. The rest was Orin analysts being very careful not to say the word afraid. The Sulhari were less careful. Their upper council met in emergency session, and the transcript, which leaked within a day, contained the phrase, "How was this permitted to happen?" 17 times, and the phrase, "What do we do now?" 6 times, with no satisfying answer attached to either. The Vreth elder who had dismissed Preth's early reports retired from his position 11 days after the Keth 7 footage was released. He did not give a reason. He did not need to. Kor called the Conclave Summit himself. He did not want to, but he understood that the alternative, letting 11 separate Conclave member species independently decide how to respond to humanity's sudden military prominence, was considerably worse than managing a single messy conversation in one room. The summit invitation to Earth's delegation was phrased with more care and more genuine respect than anything Earth had received from the Conclave since first contact. Strand arrived with Boss. Ward joined through the station's communication system, which it had interfaced with quietly and completely within 3 minutes of their arrival, and which no one on the station's technical staff noticed until Ward introduced itself during the opening session, and several Orin delegates looked sharply at their own technicians. The Sulhari representative opened with the question that everyone was actually thinking, and that no one had wanted to say first. Earth has produced a military vessel that exceeds Conclave standards in every measurable category. We would like to understand what Earth's intentions are. Boss answered before Strand could. He was not a diplomat, which was sometimes a problem and this time was not. He said, We were given a broken ship. We fixed it. Then we improved it. Because that is the part that comes after fixing something. You look at what you have, and you ask whether it could be better. We were not building against you. We were building because building is what we do. We cannot stop in the middle of a problem just because the problem got more interesting. A Vreth Council member said, carefully, "The weapon system your vessel employs, the kinetic component, is not registered in any existing arms framework." Ward's voice came from the room's communication system, calm and level. "That is because it did not exist before we built it. I can provide the technical specifications to the Conclave's arms registry if you would like to establish a framework. I have drafted a submission document. It is quite thorough." Another silence. The Orin delegation exchanged glances that were difficult to read, and then the senior Orin representative, Tessel, who had been promoted twice since correctly identifying the Fury's sensor contact, and whose presence at this summit was considered by her peers to be well-deserved, said, "Earth, we would like to discuss a new framework, one that reflects actual conditions rather than assumptions we made when you were new to the Conclave. The old framework assumed that all member species operate within a known ceiling of capability. You have made that ceiling irrelevant." Strand said, "We are open to that conversation." What followed was 3 days of negotiation that was, by diplomatic standards, remarkably straightforward. The Conclave had lost its main source of leverage, the assumption of technological superiority, and had gained, unexpectedly, a member species that had just rescued a station, disabled 11 hostile ships, and then offered medical assistance to the Conclave warships it had just outperformed. There was not a faction in the room with a coherent argument for treating humanity as a subordinate partner. Tessel had the arithmetic right. You did not offer condescension to someone who had just done what the Fury had done, and you especially did not do it twice. The summit ended with Earth formally recognized as a class-sovereign military power, a classification the Conclave's registry system had to be updated to include, because it had not previously existed. The Undying Fury was assigned a permanent operational station in Earth's home system, with Conclave recognition as an independent command vessel. The EAS Persistence, Earth's second ship, built from scratch using everything the Fury's reconstruction had taught, was registered the same afternoon. Ward's tactical assessment of its capabilities, submitted voluntarily to the Conclave's Military Review Board, caused a long and difficult conversation among the Solhari delegation that lasted into the night. On the last evening of the summit, Kor found Strand alone on an observation deck, watching a cargo shuttle move slowly between stations far below. He stood beside her for a while without saying anything. Then he said, "I read Preth's first report, the one I dismissed. He wrote that he could not be objective. I thought he was being dramatic." Strand said nothing. Kor said, "I want to ask you something honestly. When you looked at that ship for the first time at Aurelius during the ceremony, what did you actually think?" She considered the question for a moment. "I thought, they are handing us a problem and laughing about it. And then I thought, good, we are very good with problems." Kor was quiet for a moment. "Yes," he said, "I understand that now." It was not an apology in the formal sense, but it was the truest thing he had said in the 2 years since the ceremony, and they both understood what it meant. Back on the Undying Fury, which was running a routine systems check in Earth orbit while the summit concluded, Ward added a final entry to its operational log. It read, "Note for record. The Galactic Conclave presented Earth with a vessel they considered worthless. Earth rebuilt it, improved it, and used it to protect Conclave citizens from a threat the Conclave could not reach in time. The Conclave has now redesigned its classification framework to accommodate what Earth built. The lesson appears to be this: do not give humans a problem and expect them to give up. They will solve the problem. Then they will make the solution better than the problem ever deserved." This is not a warning. It is simply an observation. Ward, end of log. The stars outside the viewport were very bright and very still. The Fury held its orbit, patient and quiet, and waited to be needed again.